And we're actually going to be wrapping up our Ten Commandments series this morning. Next week, we will be doing the new members class. And so if you've been through the members class before and you are a church member, don't feel like you can't come to this because it's going to be new material, new information. And so I think you'll still enjoy it even if you've gone through it. If you're not a member and you want to go to it, please do. There's a little sign-up sheet in the back, and it's not committal in the sense that you have to go through it, and if you go through it, you will become a member, but it is something you have to go through if you want to become a member. So doing the class doesn't mean you have to become a member at the end of it, but it is necessary to become a member. So if you're interested in that, be sure to sign up. That'll start next week, 9:30 in here. But today we're wrapping up the Ten Commandments. Exodus 20 will be in just our one verse again. Am I even in Exodus 20 this morning? I am. We'll be in Exodus 20, verse 17. If you want to go ahead and turn there, that's page 78 in your Pew Bible, page 78, which is not too far in. Theodore Roosevelt once said that comparison is the thief of joy. Maybe you've heard this before, heard that saying before. And really what he means by that is jealousy, comparing yourself or what you have with another steals joy from you, which I do think is true. But I like this perspective from Abigail Dodds. She's a Christian author and a theologian who my wife really likes. She kind of pushed back on this Theodore Roosevelt quote one time, and she said this: "What if comparison is not the thief of joy, as Theodore Roosevelt once said, but rather an unwillingness to rejoice in the gifts of others?" And really what she means by that is it's not just that whenever we compare ourselves, we're robbed of joy, but we also rob ourselves of joy when we refuse to celebrate what God has given other people. The Christian posture of contentment ought to lead to me celebrating what you have as opposed to desiring what you have, which is really a different perspective on covetousness, jealousy, and all of that. We rob ourselves of joy when instead of rejoicing with those who rejoice, we covet. We miss out on joy when we cannot celebrate and be thankful with and for other people. So as we talk about the 10th commandment a bit this morning, we won't just talk about jealousy and covetousness and things like that, but also desiring what is best for our neighbor, for those around us. Because ultimately, the remedy for covetousness is, I think, summed up in love, and I think that's what Jesus sums it up in as well. So before we start, covetousness is a major issue in our culture today. You've probably picked this up if you spend any amount of time in our world. There's covetousness over stuff. Do you have the latest iPhone? You look at Instagram influencers, and those people fuel our desires for more. We want his car, that family's house. Covetousness is really the name of the game here in American culture. So it's not just an issue that we struggle with kind of individually, but it's something that we really see all across American society. I think advertisements and things like that are designed to play on our covetousness. That makes us want more, want what we do not have. Really, in a way, the system of temptation set up against us in our world whenever it comes to covetousness. So again, as we look at the 10th word today, we're going to look at what it is, some remedies in love for it, and we'll just cover a whole bunch of different stuff as well as really what covetousness or desire is. But let's start here. Let's start with a few discussion questions. Who's got my microphone? You've got my microphone. Thank you, sir. First question: what are some examples of covetousness in kind of American culture? I've given a few, but let's just kind of tease out some ideas here this morning. What are some examples of covetousness, jealousy, envy in our American culture today? Nico's got something.
Generational wealth in our country, especially now, talking politics. A big topic is, generational wealth and how people got the generational wealth, and if it's justified that they got that type of money, and whether or not they should divvy up that money because of however, they came to be. So I know, like, just generational wealth, we got like quotes like eat the rich,
yeah,
going on in our country. So
yeah. I think it absolutely plays into the heart behind some of those social issues and even those politics. I remember talking to a socialist one time, having just a discussion, and they said this: I deserve Jeff Bezos' money. What's at the heart of that, right? Politically, whether you agree or not, what's at the heart of that? It's covetousness, it's jealousy, it's envy. And so to remove the heart issue, I think would change the desired policy, but that's a discussion for, I could go off on that this morning. We won't, though. But yeah, excellent. What else? What are some other examples of covetousness, envy, jealousy in our culture? Monica.
Number of views on social media.
Yeah.
Who can have more, and if somebody has more than me, I will put some fake news going around so that
yeah, how many likes can I get? Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, especially a struggle with younger generations for sure, which I'm sure you see at schools and all that stuff. What else? What you got?
Someone's personality, like some people envy other people's personality that they're better, or compare their life with them because of their personality.
Yeah, I wish I was more outgoing. I wish I was more liked, things like that. What you got?
Appearance and popularity.
Yeah, two big ones: appearance, popularity, fame, all those different things. Absolutely. Okay, here's another question for us. Let me rephrase this. What other sins can jealousy lead to? What other sins can jealousy lead to? Michael.
Jealousy could lead to envy, hate, murder.
Yeah.
It could lead to all those kinds of things. So once you start getting jealous,
it
starts to eat away at your chance of cancer, and it brings other sins along with it.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of, here's your pop culture reference for the day, Star Wars. Envy leads to hate, hate leads to murder, hate leads to the dark side of the Force. Come on, people. What you got? Thank you for running the mic around.
Thank you. Slander.
Yeah. I want what they have. I can't have it, so I'm going to badmouth them. I'm going to gossip about them. I'm going to tear them down. That absolutely happens. Anything else? Jerry.
I just wanted to reiterate what Mike was saying. Like jealousy is bad, no doubt about it, and it's going to lead to bad things. But murder was the one that was the most significant to me, and that there's no coming back from that. So it's like it's bad.
Yeah, it absolutely. You got something, Monica? Absolutely can lead to something like murder.
There are some subtle ones, like I need to work on Sunday, so I cannot come to church because I need to make this extra money so I can get this extra stuff that everybody has.
Yeah.
Or things like that.
Yeah, it can snowball.
I cannot give to the Lord so much because I need this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it could also lead to like self-harm. Sometimes it leads people to suicide or like drinking or anything else.
Yeah, I think comparison is a symptom of covetousness, and I think you see that a lot with self-harm, where it's looking at other people, comparing myself, and it makes me feel smaller. So yeah, what you got, Nico?
I was gonna say on a bigger scale, it can lead to war. Like if an issue that one person has is rooted in coveting whatever whatever somebody has in a country or whatever this other tribe has or people have.
Yeah.
Now you gather your own army to share in whatever belief you feel is justified, and now you got like hundreds of people killing each other off of what's rooted in your own covetousness.
Yeah, resources, land, oil, right? So very interesting way to start off the lesson, right? Because here we go. We're talking about covetousness, and we've mentioned things like envy, jealousy, which we'll talk about being different a little bit here in a moment. But we already see the widespread of the effects that covetousness has, from something as intimate and personal as self-harm, for example, to literally causing wars. Covetousness spreads through all these different categories. So hopefully we see how dangerous it is just kind of right off the get-go here as we're hopping in. So let's read the 10th word, our last word, and then we'll just kind of walk through what it means, and then we'll look at some New Testament passages and talk about all sorts of stuff. So Exodus 20, verse 17, again, this is page 79 in your Pew Bible, says this, that's not the right verse, that's chapter 21. Chapter 20, verse 17, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you would just help us to guard our hearts from wrong desire, help us to guard our hearts from covetousness and envy and jealousy and comparison. Lord, I pray that you would just help us to see where we're guilty of breaking this law. Lord, I pray that you give us grace and strength to put this sin to death in our lives. Lord, I think we probably all struggle with it to some extent in some way. So I just pray that you would use your word to reveal those errors in our lives, that we might root them out and kill them, Lord, and move past it. Lord, I pray that you just give us clarity and understanding as we talk about these different passages of Scripture this morning. Lord, please illuminate your word by your Spirit that we might understand and be changed. In your name I pray. Amen. All right, let's start with the 10th word itself. It's a longer commandment. The idea of the word covet here in verse 17 is more of a broad word than the word jealousy, right? So I think typically when we think about the 10th commandment, we think about specifically jealousy, but really jealousy is like a category that's included under the umbrella of coveting. So there's a few different things that fall into what coveting is. The word coveting really is just the word for desire. The idea here is of limiting bad desires or wrong desires or sinful desires. It's really kind of fundamentally what's going on in the 10th commandment. The 10th commandment gives us two categories to think through, or two really examples of covetousness. If you look back at verse 17, you see relationships and possessions. So, right, you have coveting your neighbor's wife, and you have coveting your neighbor's property, so what belongs to him. And so it kind of gives us a picture of how covetousness can look. It isn't necessarily that I have the iPhone 11 Pro Max and I want your, what are we up to now? 17 Pro Max? Is it 17 now? They're orange, right? Kind of wild. Interesting color. But I want that phone. So it's not just limited to stuff, but also relationships, things like that. It's more broad than just kind of a materialistic thing, because as I said, he mentions desiring your neighbor's wife in there as well. But most broadly, this command is about wrong desires. It's against disordered desires and affections. In a way, and we're going to talk about this command in idolatry here in a few moments, but in a way, this command kind of bookends the 10 commandments, where we started off with idolatry, and here we come back around really to idolatry again. I'll talk about this here in a few moments in Colossians 3. But we kind of come back down to wrong desires, idolatry, and really we see how idolatry affects our human-to-human relationships. And more on that here in a second. Peter Leithart, who I've been working through his book on the 10 Commandments, which is really good, I recommend it. He wrote this about the 10th word. I thought this was helpful. He said the 10th word regulates desire. Covetousness isn't the same as jealousy or envy. Jealousy is a proper protectiveness for what is ours. Distorted, it becomes miserly. Envy is corrosive hatred for another's success or wealth, which seeks verbal or physical violence. An envious man may not physically deface his neighbor's stylish home or subvert his business. He'll take every opportunity to defame his neighbor and degrade his house. The jealous hoard, the envious kill, the covetous steal. I think that just about covers it pretty well. But really what he's saying there is that the 10th commandment regulates broadly sinful, wrong desire. It's not as narrow as just jealousy or just envy or just comparison. It's broad, but it includes all of those different things. So somebody who is envious is covetous. Somebody who is jealous is covetous. Somebody who struggles with comparison is covetous. All of those different sins fall into the category of wrong or sinful desire. Again, kind of an umbrella if we want to think about it in that way. So really we could maybe say it like this: God cares about what we want and how we want it, is really kind of the fundamental bedrock thing going on here in the 10th commandment. So the 10th word is all about regulating desire, making sure it's right desire, right wants, as opposed to sinful wants, ungodly wants. So that's kind of the 10th word in a nutshell. Let's talk a little bit more. I've got a few questions, and then we're going to move to the New Testament and look at two passages that I think will be really helpful in kind of fleshing this out. So first question, this is a little broad, but I think you'll see where I'm going. Why does God care about what we want? Why does God care about what we want? Michael's got something. It's coming from the back.
God always cares about what we want. He always wants the best for us and what we need. You know, I always believe that God will give us what he thinks is best for us and what his will is, you know, not what we think, what we need.
Yeah. What else? Cynthia.
I think that there are things that God puts in us for us to do in life. But I also think there's another part where there are times where the things that we want will pull us away from him. Yeah. So it's him guiding us towards the things that he put in us to do in life, but then also helping us to recognize the things that though we want them, we don't necessarily need them, and then working on that with internally.
Yeah, good, yeah. What else? Anything else? Barbara. Incoming.
Like Cynthia said, I think it basically reflects our relationship with Jesus. Our desire. Do we want him, or do we want that brand new car that we don't need?
Yeah. If we're not wanting him, it means we're wanting something else. And if we're wanting something else, it means we're not wanting him. It could be a way we put it. What else? Tommy.
I think like a little rudder, your heart, wherever your heart goes, wherever your desires want, you'll go.
Yeah.
So he wants you to stay on a certain path, a certain direction, and that could get you off path, I guess.
Yeah. Jesus says where your treasure is, there your heart is also. So the thing we want governs us, controls us, guides us, like a rudder. Excellent illustration. Okay, here's another question. Is there a difference between a good desire and a bad desire? Explain. And there is a difference. That's a spoiler answer to it, but explain the difference. Let's kind of tease this out a little bit.
It's basically kind of the same thing that, kind of has been said, where there are things that come up within us that we want that will pull us away from the Lord. And it's not just, it'll be a slow kind of burn. It'll be a slow building up of, because I'm going after this thing, I don't recognize that I'm spending less time in prayer, less time in my word, less time in fellowship, less time like talking about God. I'm talking about this other thing all the time, and it's becoming what my life revolves around. Yeah. So that's a bad desire. Yeah. Versus, and it usually feels good. Yeah. But versus when we're going after something that God puts on our heart that's a desire, sometimes we're letting go of things that were our identity. Yeah. And that usually doesn't feel that great. Right. But in the end, the result is a result of peace a lot of the times, versus when you're going after the other things. I've noticed within my life a lot more anxiety builds when I'm going after things that God hasn't put me on the path for. Yeah. Excellent, yeah. What else? What is the difference between a good desire and a bad desire? We're gonna look at a passage that helps tease this out next, to kind of tee us up.
I would give an example of like a good desire that can become a bad desire. Yeah. So like wanting to be successful. Right. Nothing wrong in and of itself to want to work hard to be able to provide, for your family or for yourself. The problem becomes when it's about you. So for example, right, someone can say, I want success. Okay, that's cool. You have those who want success just to hoard that money. That's bad.
Right.
You have those who want success because they're thinking about how can I bless other people.
Yeah.
That is a good thing that, from my understanding, is encouraged in the word.
Yeah.
Of like, if you are blessed with this success, you are to bless others.
Right.
Right. You have even people who, along those lines, who are just like, yeah, it's a good thing. I want to be successful. It's like, all right, cool. Well, let's test that. If you were, to give it up, like for example, what Yeshua says, or to the rich man, right?
Yeah.
I've done all these commandments. Okay, so sell everything that you own. Give up all your wealth and follow me.
Yeah.
If you hesitate on that, it's like, okay, boom, that's the heart issue right there.
Right.
You can't part with your wealth. So now you've made your wealth, that desire for success, an idol.
Right.
So what started as a good thing, a generally good thing, now has become an idol to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good, clear distinction. Here's maybe another example we could use. We visited this passage a lot with Jesus on adultery in Matthew 5. So lust after a woman in your heart, you're an adulterer, right? So you think about sex, right? God made sex. Sex is a good thing. Being married is a good thing. There's a way to want that in a right way. I want sex within the context of marriage. That's fine. But whenever it becomes lust outside of that, then it's no longer a good desire, but a bad desire. And so you can have, depending on what the chief aim is and whether it aligns with God's word, something can be good or bad, depending on what it is. Just to kind of give another example along with Nico's. Do you have something, Monica?
Psalm 37 keeps coming to my mind that says, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. And the more we delight on the Lord, our desires aligned with what he wants for us. And he wants to provide, he wants to give us the desires of our hearts, as long as we are delighting in him and not on something else.
Yeah. Amen. That's good. Yeah. Okay. Here's let's move on. We kind of already answered the third question just through conversation, which is good. Let's go to Colossians chapter 3. Let's look at this in the New Testament. Colossians 3. And we'll look at verse 5. Not too long ago, last week, we talked about putting off and putting on just a little bit. This is the parallel passage on putting off and putting on just in Colossians as opposed to Ephesians, so some of the same ideas as that one there, if you remember from last week. But I want to point out how Paul describes covetousness here in Colossians 3. Look at this is page 1253 in your Pew Bible if you're flipping still. Colossians 3, look at verse 5. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. All right, so Paul really clearly lays out, again, kind of what I was alluding to earlier. What is covetousness? It is a type of idolatry. It's idolatry that affects us on our human relational level as opposed to, a strict graven image kind of thing like we talked about in in the earlier parts of Exodus 20. But nonetheless, Paul labels covetousness as a type of idolatry. It's distorted desires. It's disordered worship. He's saying covetousness is idolatry because it is wanting something wrongly or too much, which is really what we've been talking about in our discussion for the last few minutes. It's a form of idolatry. It's treasuring what we ought not treasure. So when, for example, you're jealous of, that girl's hair, when you envy that guy's life, or you compare yourself against others, what you're really doing is practicing a form of idolatry, which might not be how we've typically understood what covetousness, jealousy, envy is, but that's what Paul is really saying is at the heart of it. At the heart of covetousness is idolatry. That's kind of the central issue, is a placing of something at the highest point of our desires and priorities, it's idolatry. So with that definition in mind, and thinking through covetousness, wrong desires, let's go to James chapter 1. You might know where I'm going. So again, just to kind of jog our memory a little bit, covetousness is really just talking about wrong desire or sinful desire, or as Peter Lightheart said, it's regulating or attempting to regulate wrong desires. And so when we're thinking about desire, I think James 1 verses 12 to 15 are probably the most helpful in the Bible for thinking about how desire or wanting, might be another way to put it, works. So James chapter 1, I'll read 12 to 15. We're really going to focus on 14 and 15 though, but just for the sake of context. This passage I think is one that if we really get it, it'll be so helpful for us in fighting sin in our lives because it's just so clear. It helps us understand how we work, but also how to kill sin. So James 1, verse 12, this is page 1288 in your Pew Bible. James writes this: "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." So he gives us really a cycle here of how sin runs its course in our lives, starting with desire, ending with death. And so I kind of want to just walk through a few things, point out a few things here, make some applications, and then we'll talk about it just a little bit once we're through it with some discussion questions. But first thing I want you to know is, first, you are not tempted because of the temptation, but because of the desire that's already in your heart. All right, that's the first big, glaring takeaway that we need to take away this morning. Let me say it again. You are not tempted because of the temptation, but because of the desire or want or covetousness, we might say, that is already in your heart. And hopefully you see that. Look at verse 14. He uses these words, lured and enticed. And really what these words are, he uses two kind of sets of imagery words in verse 14 and 15. Verse 14, he's using angling terms. And verse 15, he's using words about conception and birth and childbearing, basically, to give kind of a vivid picture of how desire and sin works in your heart. And so lured and enticed, if you've ever been fishing, that's kind of what he's trying to evoke here with this language. You know, you go fishing, and I did a lot of fishing back in Missouri, cast your little rod in, or your little, lure in, and you reel it back, and it jingles and it shines, and that entices the fish to come and bite. But James is kind of flipping on its head how we understand that. So again, look at verse 14. Each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by the temptation? No, by his own desire. The thing that's tempting, the thing that's drawing, is not the bait, not the lure, not the temptation, but his own desire that is enticing, luring him. We could almost say it like this, and maybe this will sound a bit extreme. If there wasn't the desire, temptation wouldn't be effective, right? That's kind of the idea that he's getting at here in verse 14. Temptation without desire does nothing, because it's the desire that leads us to bite onto the hook of temptation, is a way that we could say it. So it's your own desires that lure you. Maybe you've heard this phrase, the devil made me do it. That's been going around for quite a while. I believe it originated in a comedy skit, if I remember right, back in the day. But James says the theologically correct way to think about our sin is not to say, the devil made me do it, not to say, he made me do it, she made me do it, the world made me do it. If you're Adam and Eve, Adam, the woman you gave me, she gave me the fruit and I ate. He blames her. There's no blame shifting in James's understanding of how sin works. The only thing that we are left to say is, I made me do it. It's my own desires that lead me to bite onto whatever temptation that it is. I made me do it. And that's really kind of what he's putting forth here in verse 14. If it wasn't for my desires, I would not be tempted. If it wasn't for my wrong wants, I would not be moved to sin, and so on. So another thing to kind of point out here, and I'm just kind of pulling some different expository thoughts from this that I hope will be helpful. Temptation entices the appetite that is already there, right? So if you've ever gone, who's gone fishing? Is this my audience at all? Okay. A few people. Excellent. So if you've ever gone fishing, and I've heard guys say this in Ash Grove, if you go fishing during the wrong time of the day, the fish aren't hungry. I don't know what that means still to this day, but I've gone fishing at certain times in the day, and I get nothing. Nothing bites, nothing nibbles, and I'm always told it's because I went during the wrong time, the fish aren't hungry, they aren't biting at that point. So the lure's in front of them, but because they're not hungry, they're not biting. And again, that's what James is getting at here. It's the hunger, the desire, the want that's in me that makes me bite the temptation. If that hunger to do wrong isn't there, temptation isn't effective. So let's look at verse 15 for a minute. He switches in verse 15 from using fishing language to, again, like childbearing language. He talks about that desire when it's conceived, it gives birth to sin. Sin, when it grows up, leads to death. So you've got that language of conception, birth, growing up. So this idea of child rearing is kind of the word picture that he's giving us in verse 15. And really, it's a very strong verse, because the picture he's giving is that, okay, we've had this desire, we've latched onto this temptation, we've actually committed the sin, and as that sin grows up and develops in our life, eventually it leads to death. There's a guy in, I believe it was like Albania or somewhere, I forget exactly where, but he raised lions. Just had like a lion, I don't know what they're called, like a preservation maybe is the word for it. On his property, he would raise these lions from cubs. So he'd get them when they're babies, he'd bottle feed them, treat them like puppies. They would literally there's a whole, like, I forget if it's 60 Minutes or what that had him on there, but like in his house with his kids, laying in his bed like a golden retriever, right? Like, raise these lions. Now, he had this one lion cub, and eventually it grew up. And as a lion does, it got big. It got really big. And he was playing with it. They'd wrestle. He'd hug it. Well, one day it bit his throat and killed him. Went for the jugular, which is what lions do. Now, I say that to say, and to really try to illustrate what James is saying here. Sin, though it starts small, starts with desire, starts little, eventually it grows up and it goes for your jugular. Eventually it will kill you in some way, hurt you in some way, cause damage that's irreparable in your life in some way. Sin, when it's fully grown, leads to death. Sin never stays small. It never stays with just desire. And that's an important thing to realize, because sometimes, and you know, I don't want to say this, sometimes as Christians, we keep like pet sins, right? It's like, I can keep this small, I can keep this hidden, no one's going to know about it, it's just something I do every now and then. But what James is saying is that's not a thing. It will get bigger, it will cause damage, it will bring hurt. You can't keep pet sins, it doesn't stay a cub forever, it gets bigger. And so, starts with desire, gives birth, fully grown, leads to death. That's the picture that James is giving us in verse 15. Now, with kind of seeing this cycle in verses 14 and 15, with how desire or covetousness works, it starts in the heart, moves to action, leads to death. With seeing that, I think the best question that we could ask as far as like an application level is, okay, seeing how sin works, how do we fight it better now, kind of knowing how it plays out in our lives? And I've got an answer to that, and I think James is really helpful here with thinking through how to fight sin. And I think the best way to fight sin, based on James chapter 1, verses 14 and 15, is to fight sin at the desire level. Fight sin at the desire level. So, you know, picture this. We had a garden in Ash Grove. We've got a flower garden over here as well. But we had a pretty big like vegetable garden in Ash Grove, and you know, in it, if you've ever had a garden, you've got to pick weeds. Kills your plants. Now imagine you have a garden and there's big weeds growing up, killing your tomatoes, your cucumber, your squash, it's going down, the weeds are taking over. And so you go out to your garden with scissors, and you go to the weeds and you cut the tops off the weeds. Is that going to get rid of the weeds? No. What do? You go and you grab the weed from the root, or try to, and you pull it up by the root. You get it at the bottom from the lowest level. What James shows us here is that when it comes to sin, we need to fight it at the root level, right? Sometimes what we'll do as Christians is we fight just at the behavior level. And I think this is important. I want you to get this morning. Sometimes we'll fight sin just at the behavior level. We go into the garden, we cut the tops off with scissors, and we think we're good. I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to stop gossiping. I'm going to stop watching pornography. I'm going to stop doing this. And that's it. And what typically happens whenever a Christian fights sin in that way by just cutting off the behavior is in 2 weeks they do it again. As somebody who's counseled people in the past, I've seen that numerous times in pastoral ministry. I'll stop the behavior, but stopping the behavior doesn't actually stop the sin, because the behavior is not the root problem, it's the desire. And so when we fight sin, when we deal with sin in the Christian life, we start at the level of desire, of covetousness. We pull it up by the root. For instance, I'm trying to think of a good example, me getting angry in traffic. Somebody cuts me off and so on. Smack my steering wheel. I'm not saying I do this, but punch your steering wheel, get mad. Okay, I want to stop doing that, so I'm going to stop doing that while I'm driving. Well, what's the real issue behind that? I've got an angry heart, and I need to work on the desires that's behind that, so I stop that action. Would be maybe a way that we could think about it. So maybe here's some other examples to kind of just give us a picture of how this works. It's not enough to just stop buying things that you don't need. You need to stop loving stuff, right? That would be another illustration. It's not enough just to stop watching pornography. You need to stop lusting. That would be another example. It's like, I can stop the behavior, sure, but if the desire's not changed, I'm not changed, and it's going to grow back, because that's how weeds work. That's how sin works. So we fight sin at the desire level. Let's discuss. We've talked about a lot. Few questions. Give me some examples of sinful actions and the desires that are likely behind them. Let's just kind of tease out this way of thinking for a moment to really let it sink into us. Give me some examples of sinful actions and the desires that are often behind them. I've given a few. Let's think in this way. Tommy.
Sometimes gossiping, I guess, could be driven by envy, like what we're talking about. Like, you want what the person has, so you demean them in the people's eyes. Yeah. So I gossip, I tear this person down because I am jealous of them. So, yes, stop gossiping, but ultimately I need to change the contentment of my heart, or I need the Lord to change the contentment of my heart. What you got, Cynthia?
Thinking about, like, being controlling is, I think, usually the root of that is resentment of, like, I don't know, resenting that, well, I do this, so that means that you have to do this because I do this. It's kind of like that tick-tack thing. So, yeah. Yeah, resentment, bitterness, malice, all those things, for sure. What you got?
I was going to say someone who always starts conflicts might do that because they're not happy with who they are, or they might not know who they are. Yeah. And so almost like an insecurity thing, they lash out at other people. Yeah. I guess, because I'm thinking about like something that my father told me when I was younger, of like when it comes to like physical fighting. Yeah. And he was like, you don't always have to react, right? Like, a lot of people react because at the base it's fear. It's like, I'm not going to be taken advantage of, I need to show that I'm tough, this, that, and the third. But if you're secure in yourself, if you know who you are, you don't have to react. Yeah. You can choose how to react. So someone who's always starting conflict, coming out of fear. Yeah. Yeah, fear is a big one for a lot of different sins. What you got? Back there, yeah.
I was gonna say something similar, where like going straight to trying to physically hurt somebody can come from being in a state of anger all the time. Yeah. Which I see a lot with what's going on in this generation.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? Any other examples? Again, I'm just trying to tease out this idea that sinful behavior is rooted in sinful desire. We've got to target the behavior and the desire. Pull the whole weed up. Any other thoughts or examples? Otherwise, I'll move on to another question. Okay, good. Here's another one. How can we fight sin at the desire level, right? So practically, how do we do this? How do we fight sinful desires, push back on our sin on this level?
I think that this is where fellowship, like actual fellowship, comes in, where we need to be having conversations with the people who believe in Christ, who we're close to, and be honest and saying, this is something that I'm struggling with. I need you to come beside me and pray with me and be somebody that I can, somebody who can call me out when they see it. Yeah. But also, like, you know, be kind of walk through it with me, with God. Yeah. Because I think as Christians, we forget that we need to be talking to each other and sharpening each other while we're struggling through things.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful because it also reminds us that if we fight sin in this way at the desire level, it's not a quick fix. And I think that's important, right? Whenever I just target the behavior, I'm going to stop doing this. That's fast. It might, seem like it's progress, but to actually have our desires change, to kind of go back to what Tommy said about like a rudder, like turning a ship is hard, right? It's a slow process. There's a lot of movement in it to change the direction, to change course. And so fighting at the desire level, it takes time. It needs accountability. It needs a lot of things working in us, a lot of ways that God works by His Spirit, whether it's through fellowship, the Word, whatever it might be, to shift our desires in a different direction. What do you got?
Another thing might be to catch it when it arises. So like when we have the thought, acknowledge that it's there and think it's wrong and change it and stop before you act on it. Yeah, absolutely. Paul talks about in Corinthians taking your thoughts captive. And so having that kind of mental heart control for sure.
All right, I'll give an example, a real life example for myself. When I was younger, I had like this real dark hatred for like humanity, right? But it shifted when I rededicated my life to Christ, and it clicked in my heart and in my head that we are all created in the image of God. And if God, came down to die for such people, who am I to harbor anger for that? So, an example would be, I would say one that I think covers both believer and unbeliever is one starting with the understanding that this person is created in the image of God. And then two, as you were asking the question, the scripture that came to my mind was Leviticus 19, I believe, verse 20. I could have those flipped, but basically where God tells the Israelites, not to mistreat the foreigner living among them, because they too were foreigners in a different land. So it's kind of like remembering where you used to be, or your need for a savior, and being like, all right, I need to show mercy to this person. I need to remember where I've come from and where God has forgiven me. I need to keep that in mind when I'm dealing with other people. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Preach the gospel to yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Jerry, what you got?
Just wanted to say, sometimes you have to identify what's going on, and then you have to make a substitution. You have to be the coach. You have to be the substitution. And, if it was so negative, you got to make it positive. Do something that's positive. And with that said, anything that will distract you from that, whatever, and then you should be okay, and you ask for God's grace to kind of help guide you, and I don't think He's going to turn His back on you.
Yeah, amen. go. All right, here's another question. What happens if we only fight sin at the behavior level? What happens if we only fight sin at the behavior level? Comes back, yeah? Absolutely it does. What else? What else? Cynthia?
I think sometimes it turns into other sin. It just comes out in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say that it kind of distracts you from focusing on fixing other parts of your life as well. Because if you're constantly just, like, with that analogy of, like, picking off the top, you kind of made it a routine to be like, okay, let me just go and pick off the top. And now there's, like, a bunch of other things going wrong where it's like you're just hyper-focused on this one. Like, obviously, yes, it's still bad. Right. But you're kind of denying the fact to go to the root of it so you can go and focus on other parts, if that makes sense. Yeah,
excellent. What you got, Tommy?
Maybe you start feeling like irredeemable because you keep inevitably stumbling again.
Yeah.
Because it comes back.
Yeah, that's where my mind went, where it's like I'm discouraged and I'm burnt out. It's like, man, I've been struggling with this for a year. Like, you know, and I've met people where it's like they fight sin at the behavior level, and because of that they have no progress, and they're like, am I even saved? Right? Like they begin to have, you know, struggles of eternal security and things like that, and it just kind of snowballs in that way where it's so discouraging and there's no victory and it feels very oppressive. It can burn you out. And so, yeah, like there's a discouragement element to it where it's like, why can't I see victory? Well, you're fighting your sin wrong. You're just trying to deal with what's obvious as opposed to the root problem. Anything else on that? Anything else? Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's go to Matthew 22 really quick. Not really quick. We got like 10 more minutes. Matthew 22, and we're going to look at what Calvin says is the summary of, or really the remedy to covetousness, which is love. You'll remember the wording in Exodus 20, verse 17, was your neighbor's wife, your neighbor's house. And so there's this element of covetousness has to do with how we treat our neighbor. And so I think what Jesus says here really helps us think through how to fight covetousness in a way that's really effective, and that's with love. And really, I think this plays into what we've been talking about with desire, and fighting sin at the desire level, right? Like what would be, you know, with jealousy or envy, what would be like a way I could fight that desire or fight that on the desire level? All right, I'm going to put away this desire and I'm going to put on love for my neighbor, right? That would be one way to fight it. So let's look at Matthew 22 and look at verse 34. It's page 1052 in the Pew Bible. Verse 34, but when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment, and a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So Jesus here is summing up the law in response to the Pharisees and Sadducees attempting to trap him. And basically what he's saying is the greatest commandment is to love God, and the second is to love your neighbor. And in keeping these two commands, you kind of by default keep the rest of them, right? I'm not going to murder my neighbor if I love my neighbor. I'm not going to rob my neighbor if I love my neighbor. I'm not going to lie about you if I love you. I'm not going to make an idol and put it in my closet if I love God, right? That's kind of the idea here is in loving God and loving neighbor, I keep the rest of the commandments. And so he says there in verse 40, on these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Some translations say hang. So it's kind of this picture of like you hang your coat on it. Like it's all dependent. It's all hanging on these two things, love of God, love of neighbor. And as I said, I think that this is really a great remedy to coveting, to jealousy, to envy, all these different things that we've been talking about. Calvin says this is the remedy to coveting in his commentary on the Ten Commandments. He talks about how instead of wanting what your neighbor has, want what is best for him. So that would be kind of the trade-off. I'm not wanting what my neighbor has. I'm wanting what is best, what increases his life, what does the most for him, for furthering him and helping him to prosper. Love of neighbor is the remedy to covetousness. I think this kind of goes back also to what Abigail Dodd said in that quote that I gave at the beginning. Joy is found in being able to celebrate how God has gifted other people. So I'm loving others. I'm rejoicing in what they have. I'm celebrating what they have. It's about their good as opposed to my good, right? I'm not thinking about what I want, but what is best for my neighbor. I should want my neighbor's, or I should not want my neighbor's things. I should want what is best for him. And so, again, Jesus summarizes the whole law in love of God, love of neighbor. Love is the summary of the law. Here's a few more questions for us, and then we'll wrap up. We'll do 2 more questions with the time we've got left. How does love keep us from sinning against God and neighbor? How does love keep us from sinning against God and neighbor? What do we got? Michael?
If you love God and his word and you love your neighbor as yourself, you're not going to want to sin.
Yeah.
And if you have sin in your life, you're going to want to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our desires and focus are changed to be towards God, absolutely. What else? Anything else? Okay, here's another question, and we'll end on this one. How is there more joy in wanting what is best for someone else? This is a happy question to end on. How is there more joy in wanting what is best for others?
What God said in his word is, what is it more? Okay, well, there's more joy in giving to others than just always keeping things to yourself, but wanting to see the best for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. What you got, Nico?
Just practically, it takes the burden off of you, you know, in the sense of, you know, if I just want the best for somebody else, right, you're not, or you shouldn't be so concerned about this person's not doing what I want them to do or what, you know, they should be doing in my eyes. It's like, listen, I just want the best for you. However God uses that, however God brings you there, that's what my focus is. It's not the how you do X, Y, and Z. Is not, oh, you got to do it like this. Oh, let me step in and do this for you. It's like, no, however God brings you there, the end goal is, well, I'm concerned is that, you know, it's what the best for you is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it takes the burden off of you.
Absolutely. What you got? Last one, and we'll pray after this.
I was going to say also, like, most emotions are contagious in a sense. So, like, if someone you love is angry, you might start to feel a bit of anger too, seeing them hurt. Yeah. But if you allow yourself to try and make them feel joy, you naturally just tend to find yourself being more happy and joyful as well. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's pray, and we'll break, and we'll come back and worship here in 30 minutes. Bow your heads in the Lord. Thank you for your word. Thank you for the 10 Commandments, Lord. They've been so helpful to me, Lord, so convicting. Lord, I just pray that you would use them in our lives, Lord, to just keep us on the rails, Lord, to expose our sin, to point us to our need of Christ, and also to help us live holy lives. Lord, I pray that you'd help us today to fight sin at the root level, to not just cut the tops off of weeds, but to pull up the root, to aim for desires, aim for wrong desires, and having our desires changed to be fixed on you, fixed on loving our neighbors. Lord, I just pray that you be with us here in a few moments as we gather, assemble to worship. Lord, I just pray that you would honor yourself, that you'd exalt your Son through everything that we do, Lord, especially as we take at the table this morning, Lord, that you would, Lord, glorify yourself in that, Lord, that you cleanse us of sin, that you'd just nourish us spiritually today. It's your name I pray. Amen.